And so when I realized that, our mood, our cravings, our hunger, it's all coming from these guys.
Wow.
It makes you think about it differently.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's like, okay, well, now I realize that maybe this mental health crisis that we're facing is not really just a deficiency of neurochemicals in the brain.
Shout out again, Dr. Chris Palmer.
It's all coming from our body, and our intestines are unhealthy, and our immune system is unhealthy. I'm Dr. Amy Shah. I'm a double board certified MD nutritionist and the author of the new book, I'm So Effing Hungry. I'm so honored to be on the Ever Forward radio show today, talking about why we crave what we crave, what's behind those cravings, and what can we do to change them.
Welcome back.
Thanks so much for having me.
What have you been up to the last couple of years?
Oh, wow.
2 years almost.
Yeah,
exactly.
2 years. I've been writing a new book.
Yeah. Keeping on with the I'm So Effing brand, which I love, by the way.
It just so happened. And I was saying to you before we started this that I felt like a newborn in this wellness world because, coming from an MD traditional background, I did all the traditional training, to the wellness world was like a shock. Like I said, felt like a newborn into this new world. And now I feel like a toddler.
Got your legs. Welcome. All right.
There you go. I'm ready to walk.
Yeah. That's a really interesting way to kick things off. And I want to highlight the new book and the new work for sure. But when I encounter MDs or traditional primary care providers who transition, we'll say, into more of what I used to do in clinic, working with primary care providers in this integrative model of fitness, nutrition, wellness, plus traditional allopathic care. Why? What was the thing that brought you over to kind of go more of that route?
I was a nutrition undergraduate student. So I always was obsessed with nutrition and metabolism and how it affects our body and disease. And I didn't know what to do with it when I was done. And there weren't a lot of options for
other
nutrition.
than like maybe an RD.
Yeah, you could be a dietitian.
Right, yeah.
You could work for a hospital. And I just wasn't really sure that was what I really wanted to do. I really wanted to work on the human body and how nutrition affects our body. And so I went to medical school, and I still felt like, wow, I don't feel like this is going the way I want.
Probably thinking that was the right course, right?
Right.
You want to work on the human body, let me become a human body expert.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then I did internal medicine, which is kind of like the adult medicine, because there's a lot of metabolism, there's a lot of, but I still felt like it wasn't using my nutrition knowledge. And so when I was in medical school, we did rotation, and the one rotation that really kind of hit the nail on the head for me was we sat in an immunology lecture, and they said, okay, at the turn of century in London, things changed for people. And I'm like, oh, really? They're like, people started to get autoimmune diseases, and people started to get sicker, and they didn't know why. And it turns out that it was the rich families moving into London out of the farms and changing the way they eat, changing the way they live, and becoming, cleaner, more sophisticated. And they started to get sick. And the kids started to get diseases like asthma, food allergies, autoimmune issues.
All while seemingly leveling up their class.
Exactly.
And becoming high society people.
Exactly. And that to me was like, that's what I felt like inside. That was my hunch, that there was something better about the farm life, about the old days, right?
Yeah.
So
literally
they came
getting
up,
your hands dirty every day.
Yeah, like literally being around other people, other animals, other families, being with nature. And then they came out with a huge hypothesis that became the prevailing hypothesis in 1989. It was the hygiene hypothesis, which is your body, your immune system, your GI tract needs to see other microbes, other animals, other nature, to learn. And if you don't give it that, then things backfire, things go awry. And to me, you know, I am an Indian immigrant, and my first 5 years of life was like very rural in that sense. And I just felt like that was it. I think that's what's going wrong. That's what I thought in my mind.
Kind of brought you back to home a little bit.
It's the food. It's changing the food. It's the way we eat out of wrappers, and you don't see the sun. You don't interact with as many people. And so that's what I really thought that was my thing. So I decided to do immunology, but little did I know that immunology, even today, even in 2023, and definitely 10 years ago, is a research-based. There's still nothing you can really do to boost the immune system, no matter what ad tells you. You know, ads tell you, oh, take this, take that, take this. Really, the interventions are natural. You know, get sleep, get sunlight, eat a good diet.
Crazy. Yeah. Would have thought.
Yeah. And then so it kind of brought me back to, okay, well, it was a combined fellowship. It's called allergy and immunology. So most of my patients that I was seeing was not for immune system or microbiome stuff. It was for allergies. And I kept seeing so many allergies, like food allergies and environmental allergies. It just made me think like, we need to talk about this more. We need to look at the research. And that's when the microbiome research was just like starting to explode. And that's what really brought me into this world, because I started to feel like it was something I needed to talk about and educate people about. Like, hey, at first it was just, hey, go back to nature, you know, get some more nature time, eat the right foods. That's why I became on social media, like the fasting expert, because out of all the things I was saying, people were like, wait, what are you talking about, this fasting thing?
Yeah, that's your handle, right?
It is.
MD, yeah.
And it was about, because everything I said about diet, nature, you know, whatever, people are like, but what's this circadian fasting thing that you're saying? And it was just basically that thousands of years ago, people didn't eat at midnight. There's no Uber Eats. There's no microwaves. People didn't stay up all night. Mostly it was sun up to sundown. And even, like I said, even my first few years of life, it was very traditional. We basically ate our last meal. And then you didn't really have much after that. And so I just thought, wow, that makes sense with the time-restricted eating studies. That makes sense. Evolutionarily, we were built to kind of go into repair and renewal mode in the evening. So why are we talking about fasting in a way where we eat late into the night, but then we don't eat halfway through the day? I thought that was kind of backwards in my mind. So I started to talk about a different way of intermittent fasting. And so that became kind of my thing. And I talked about this on social media recently. I thought of this book idea, the one that I just wrote years ago. And I wrote the whole proposal. I don't know, Chase, if you've ever written a proposal, but it's like a beast, especially if you've never done it before.
I have one, yeah.
And I presented it to all the best places I knew, and they all said no. They were like,
really?
This is not, first of all, I had no audience really.
Okay.
You know, and that was probably the major thing. And then secondly, they said, this is like, you know, nature, sunlight, you know, what you're
like, there's nothing new here.
Yeah. Like, what's the magic thing? What's the secret? What's the, you know, and I realized like, oh, I see, like they wanted it to be like packaged in the right way.
Some novelty.
Yeah. And so not to say it was, you know, it was very devastating at the time. But I just going back to practice. And then when I got the opportunity to write my first book, I kept thinking in the back of my mind, I'm like, I want to like revisit this mind, gut, immune thing. And because I always tell patients, like, don't miss the big picture, the brain, immune, gut picture, because we always talk about mental health, or we talk about, your digestion, it's all separate, right? But like, we're really missing that connection between the three big areas that we really neglect, like the power of the brain, the power of the immune system, the power of the gut. I mean, the gut has more influence over your cravings, your mood, whether you're hungry or not, what actions you're going to take than you would ever imagine. It's stronger than the brain. Like, people think that they're feeling a certain way because of their brain? No, it's like because of those microbes.
Yeah. I have this theory, personal theory, but has been definitely kind of been supported by a lot of what you're talking about. And the more that I talk to experts like yourself and my own personal research, and it's that I really do think the gut is the driving force of our entire being. Yeah. Separate from, consciousness, maybe, the soul, kind of that innate aspect. But, we do typically believe the brain is what's driving the ship.
Right.
And we know we have a very strong connection between the brain and the gut, the vagus nerve.
Yeah.
We can track all of these neurotransmitters and chemicals and things that are happening, signaling back and forth.
Yeah.
But when we look at now, I think a lot of the new science is showing, years ago, when I was kind of getting into this, it used to be like, 50% of your immune system is in the gut, 50% of dopamine, serotonin. Yeah. Now it's like 60, 70.
Yeah.
Like, hold on. If all of this new research is showing either an increasing level or we're just learning that this increased level was already there, doesn't that kind of tip the scales a little bit?
Yeah.
So if the stomach, the gut, really is driving the ship more and is maybe even influencing the brain in terms of neurotransmitters and also then how that actually controls the rest of our nervous system, shouldn't we then be focusing more on gut health first?
Yeah.
If we want to start, what's the best place to start to have the most amount of influence, especially when it comes to cravings and nutrition and like the quality of things we're putting in to feed all of that? Shouldn't we be going here?
Absolutely. I mean, and the thing is that food is the biggest needle mover when it comes to gut health. And so it becomes like, wow, we're in charge now again, because I think in the other model, it's almost like you're
dealt these cards.
Yeah. Like you crave what you crave. You are who you are, you can't really change much. But in this new model, if you think about it, that gut bacteria turn over, every 15 minutes. And then in 3 days, you can have a market changed microbiome, really puts a power back into you.
Wow. So as little as 3 days, if we consciously we're conscious of what we're putting into our bodies, we could really flip the script on a lot of these cravings and just, sensations and the kind of person that we think we are, especially when it comes to our wellness.
Yeah, so what they did is there was a landmark study. In 2014, they took people and they rapidly changed their diet. And they were like, let's see, how long does it take to start to change this microbiome? And they saw that within 3 days, things looked so different.
Wow.
It was almost unrecognizable from 3 days ago.
What does radical mean? Can you kind of dissect that a little bit?
So the radical change that they wanted to really see, they took an ultra processed diet.
Okay. So people maybe who are on kind of the standard American
diet. Yeah. Soda, burgers, drive-thrus, French fries, the whole thing. And then
nobody listening to this show. Every once in a while.
Right. And then just to show the contrast, they changed their diet so drastically into a whole foods, plant-focused diet.
Wow, okay.
I believe it was plant-based, if I'm not mistaken, or at least it was plant-focused. And they wanted to see, okay, well, let's see how fast it can change, if it changes. And it was so shocking to see when they sequenced the microbiome that it was that fast. Because over, of course, after the 3 days, 4 days, 5 days. So what these bacteria start to do for you is that they start to create their own cravings, their own hunger hormones, their own satiation. So
you no longer have control over us.
Yes.
We're going to let you know what we need and want.
So basically it's like, how they say, take the action and then the motivation follows. Motivation follows action. In this case, that's what they saw. They saw these people just took action, started to change their diet. And as they start to change, the new microbes started to create chemicals to have more of that food. So if you've noticed, if you go on a weekend kind of binge, right? You go all out, you're drinking, you're eating, and it's really hard on Monday or Tuesday, especially if it's been 3 or 4 days.
There's
go
no
back.
motivation.
Yeah, exactly.
Monday hits. Yeah.
Yeah. And you feel like it's, especially if it's been 3 to 4 days, it's really hard to then switch back to a healthy diet. And so I thought about the study and I thought that's like every weekend for a lot. It's like Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Even for the health conscious person, most people, it's if I can get Monday through Friday right, then the weekends are my downtime, which serves a purpose, I think, for people in different places in their wellness journey, of course. But it's just like, really?
Yeah, because I don't know if you've ever done this, but it's been a while since I did this, but I did it this past weekend because I was at end of my fitness, goals. And I did like a photo thing and I, finished. And so I thought, oh, you know what? I'm going to take Friday, Saturday, Sunday off like I haven't done in years. And I ate and I did things. We went to, I was off for a girls' weekend in Vegas. It was like a perfect timing. But I came back on Monday and I was the lowest of the low. I mean, my mood, my motivation, and my desire I didn't have any desire for healthy foods. Like I wanted that sugar again. I wanted the processed food again.
Well, think about it. If this study was showing how radical towards the healthier spectrum in 3 days we could go, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, it's that quick just to go the opposite way.
Exactly. And then it just made sense to me why this, feeling of low, my motivation was low, and I kept craving the unhealthy stuff. It's like, just like you said, as fast as it changes to a good place, it can change to a bad place. But it just made me realize, like, I don't think people really realize the food-mood connection and the food craving, hunger connection. So we know intuitively eating healthy is good for us, but I don't think I realize that it's so good that in the immediate setting, your mood is going to be boosted. You're not going to crave as much. You're going to feel like your hunger is more controlled. And then I read the research and it was so mind-boggling. Like bacteria in your body make hunger hormone or like satiation hormones. So they make these peptides that look to the body just like a like that you're satisfied. So it looks like neuropeptide YY or it looks like CCK, closest to kinine. And so basically it acts in the brain so you feel full because of the gut bacteria sending signals to the brain.
Interesting.
And same thing, they can block that and make you hungrier. So that's why sometimes if you think about your sugar cravings, it really could be coming from the bacteria in your gut really craving that sugar.
Which explains why, I don't know, maybe I'm alone. It's not always when I get those cravings, it's not always that I'm actually hungry.
No.
There's no hunger going on.
Hunger and cravings
Totally separate.
are totally separate. They're in different parts of the brain and they work completely differently. So there are overlaps, right? Because when you are hungry and you don't eat, the craving centers do get activated as well. So anyone who's been on a diet knows that both their hunger and their cravings will be very high when they're on a diet.
It's like we test our bodies for what we want to put them through for maybe a weight goal or something.
Yes.
But then the body's like, okay, I got you. I'm going to test you as well.
Yes.
You're going to restrict the total energy coming in calories. I'm going to challenge you more and activate these cravings.
Yeah. And the crazy thing is that we've now found that with obesity, with certain diseases, the hunger signaling is altered. And so they're getting hungrier and they're getting less full because the leptin is, your body's not as sensitive to leptin and the ghrelin is higher. And it's really...
Leptin's the hormone to kind of signal, hey, we're good, we're full. Ghrelin is the like, hey, I'm hungry, time to eat.
Right. So basically, not only are you fighting against, the conventional food system, the biases against overweight, obesity, you're also fighting against your hunger hormones. It's like, it's so multi-layered. And we have to understand that, obesity can't just be treated with one, calorie restricted diet, for example, because the hormones are altered. And so that's why that GLP-1 agonist, Ozempic, I'm sure you've heard of it, this weight loss drug, the way it works is it activates the satiation hormone, GLP-1. And so you will feel full even if you've eaten a little amount. And what people don't really realize is that you can activate GLP-1 on your own too with certain foods.
Interesting.
And same with so neuropeptide YY, leptin, all of these things are we can modulate them. And one of the best ways to modulate them is through our gut bacteria, because our gut bacteria, actually, the more diverse your gut bacteria is, the more kind of army soldiers there are down there, the better your fullness signals become. And so one of the easiest ways, if you're someone who's struggling, with cravings and with hunger or with excessive kind of weight, then one of the best things you can do instead of going on these diets, which don't work.
Not long term, really.
Yeah. I mean, exactly. They don't work as a permanent solution. Is to work on your gut health and make your gut bacteria more diverse, so then it starts to help you with your hunger and cravings. And I think that model is not something we've ever heard of or used, but that's really the way the science is showing us that we can help these people. So like GLP-1 agonists, injections, instead of that, or if you're trying to wean off of that, maybe you start to diversify your microbiome. And so you get some help from your own GLP-1, your own CCK, your own neuropeptide YY. And all of a sudden, you're able to control those cravings and hunger. And so I think there's so much potential to learning that brain-gut connection. And you were saying about the brain and the gut, how everybody always talks about the brain as the kind of central command center. So what I want to tell everyone and tell you is, like, in the embryo, they start as one clump of cells, the gut and the brain.
This is fascinating.
Right? And then they start to separate as you grow, and they stay connected with the vagus nerve. And there's a whole enteric nervous system, a whole nervous system that connects them. And so it makes sense that they communicate so well.
When I learned this, I think this is one of the things that has blown my mind the most about the human body. And of course, really solidifies what we're talking about of the brain-gut connection. It starts as the same cell. When we are created, when we are developing, when we are teeny, tiny little microscopic beings, that vagus nerve and that entire existence is our brain and what becomes our stomach and the gut. The vagus nerve is all right there. So, of course, we started as the same thing. We just kind of grew. We have a little bit of distance between us.
Yeah. And that's why the communication is so strong between the brain and the gut. And now, so the gut bacteria, what was surprising to me, I think I learned, we learned that there's gut bacteria living in our colon. I always knew that. But I had no idea that it was such a thick community. So our cells is just one layer of cells. But the microbiota is like a thick, multi-layered, protective layer on both sides of our gut.
It's not just a cell in this barrier. It's layers of.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so what happens is when food comes through, your body, your gut bacteria first see it, and they talk to the immune system. If they need help, they call them in.
Like, hey, friend or foe?
Yeah, let's create a little immune response if it's an enemy. And what we call inflammation, it's really just the gut bacteria telling the immune system, hey, this does not look normal. Let's check it out. And once the inflammation starts, they send a signal to the brain like, hey, we're working on something here. And when you're inflamed,
we'll be back with you shortly.
And when you're inflamed, the brain knows, okay, I got to slow down here because we're dealing with an emergency. So if you've ever seen a dog who's sick, you'll see they're kind of lethargic, kind of down when they're sick. Because when you're inflamed, your brain knows, hey, there's a problem down here, so let's just slow down. Let's take it easy. Let's not work on very complex tasks. So we live...
Throttle metabolism, brain function, cognitive function, everything,
When you're eating a lot of inflammatory foods, you're creating lots of little inflammation signals to the brain. And so then you wonder why that food is making you tired, why you have a little bit of brain fog, why you can't be on all four cylinders is because of that inflammation going on. So that gut bacteria is constantly communicating hormones, metabolism, sending messages to the brain. It's also protecting our layer of cells. And so when you take antibiotics, for example, or you just consistently deplete that gut, those layers, what you end up seeing is that toxins start to reach into our own cells. And they sometimes—
They've made it through all those layers.
Yeah,
and they're at the
because
front
now
line.
the layers are like, very sparse because of antibiotics or just poor diet or just you're killing your gut bacteria. And they're able to get in and your body can make antibodies to it. And so then you get food allergies, you get autoimmune disease, you get, your body starts to see these things as foreign, gluten sensitivity, all these things that we talk about as autoimmunity starts to happen. And so there's this theory that as we started to deplete the microbiome in humans, we started to see more of these diseases. And so basically that hygiene hypothesis that I told you has now been extended into a microbiome hypothesis saying, hey—
That was just the surface of it.
Yeah. He's like, hey, since people are babies, they're not getting enough immune system activation. They're not getting enough bacteria seeding their gut. And it's causing consequences as you get older.
This analogy or this picture comes to mind. I think of every like old school war movie or medieval movie I ever saw. We've got the castle wall, we've got the frontline defenses outside of that, and then we've got the opposing force, the enemy.
Yeah.
Well, what we're talking about here is just, the constant bombardment by our own choice or circumstance of just bombardment after bombardment after bombardment of taking out that frontline defense. And then all of a sudden we're at the wall, we're behind the wall.
Yeah.
And then this constant barrage of attack inside the wall causing chronic inflammation, keeping everybody inside that fortress, our body, unnecessarily working to just maintain some kind of remnant of order. That's what we're talking about here with increased inflammation, unnecessary energy. It's just, I always either come up with like fitness analogies or like war analogies, I guess, with my background. But just
with you. And I love, because it is kind of like the army kind of, work for us.
It's just, what are your frontline defenses and how well are those being kept up? And then what happens if, you get behind enemy lines?
Well, since we're going there, I want to propose the alternative theory that some people have posed is that these guys aren't protecting us at all. The alternative theory is that they're trying to survive. They're trying to flourish themselves. These bacteria are sending signals to your brain to hijack you as their host. And that it's really all about them. And you're just a vessel for their survival.
I think Dr. Chris Palmer, I think he brought this up, or somebody recently proposed this other theory of the whole human experience is actually we're just like puppets of these little microbes, basically.
Like a bacterial experience that we're just the vessel in them. And when I thought about it that way, I thought like, it's like how people think like cockroaches will win the world or something. It's like that, like these microbes, they have the ability to change so fast and adapt to their environment. But, the problem with that theory is that we know they do so many good things for us and we know they make us happy. They actually make dopamine. And the dopamine that they make is 10 to 100 times stronger than our own dopamine.
Wow.
And so we need them.
What is our dopamine then? If they're making their own version of dopamine, where do we get our dopamine?
So we can get 50% of our dopamine is made in our gut. And the other dopamine is made in our brain. And the dopamine that's made in our gut is not always traveling to the brain. So you can't, so sometimes it's just dealing with, local issues, making you feel relaxed. It's doing some local work, but it's also sending signals to increase the dopamine in the brain. But the dopamine that the bacteria make, like immediately creates change for us. and it raises our baseline dopamine levels. And it makes us more motivated, or, because dopamine is our motivation hormone.
Yeah.
And it makes us, there's serotonin. There's even adrenaline, like norepinephrine is made by certain bacteria. GABA are relaxing neurochemical. And so when I realized that, our mood, our cravings, our hunger, it's all coming from these guys.
Wow.
It makes you think about it differently, right? It's like, okay, well, now I realize that maybe this mental health crisis that we're facing is not really just a deficiency of neurochemicals in the brain.
Shout out again, Dr. Chris Palmer.
Yeah, it's all it's all coming from our body, and our intestines are unhealthy, and our immune system is unhealthy, and that's the big picture. One of the things I find motivating is that when they do studies, they're able to see such a huge change with small measures like diet. I mean, diet is something we all can change. And sometimes people don't want to do it for cardiovascular health, but if you tell them, hey, do it so you can feel more motivated, I think that's a big, stronger motivator to me than doing it for, a lot of people think, well, I'll just die early. It's not a big deal, right? But don't you want to wake up every day and look forward to your day, or be motivated, or have happiness? I mean, we go through extraordinary measures to make ourselves happy. And what if there was an easier way to do it?
It's kind of like, as I continue to choke on air, excuse me, I think so many of us, especially in the health, wellness, medical profession, when we're working with a client, a patient, and we want a big part of our job, I think if we're doing our job correctly, is to help them realize and get to that motivation.
Yeah.
Go from an intrinsic to an intrinsic motivation model. And a lot of times for a lot of people, for whatever reason, we can't be adherent to the change that we feel we need or want in our life for our own reasons. But the second maybe an outside force comes in, like, don't you want to be around longer for your kids?
Yeah.
Don't you want to be able to get down on the ground and pick up your grandchildren and not blow out your back? Don't you want all these other things that serve other people? Works as this extrinsic motivation. But I love kind of like, taking that and coupling with what you're talking about here. When we do that, unbeknownst to us, well, now we know, we're actually creating that positive change at the microbial level.
Yeah.
So it's like we can take, again, the microbes are running the ship. It's like, we just get them to think of the external change, the feeling, the emotion they want. But by implementing these small changes internally, we're going to help create that for them and get them there faster. Yeah,
exactly. So basically, they start to help you on your journey. And I think intuitively, we all know that's true. That's why once you start to get more motivated to be healthier, do the healthy things.
The second we see a little change, feel a little change, it's like, okay, I can do this more.
Yeah. And the other thing that I think is fascinating is that, cravings is such a big problem in our world today. Just knowing that there's something we can do about our cravings, because it's not just food. I mean, we're craving Instagram. We're craving video games. We're craving gambling, porn, alcohol. I mean, these are all the dopamine pathway. And now that we're learning, okay, well, you can raise these levels of dopamine. There are things you can do, like go for a sunny walk that actually releases dopamine in your brain, that you could start to use in your toolbox as you start to change your habits. Like, I think that when you're stuck in a place where maybe you're checking your phone, hundreds of times an hour to get that dopamine hit.
First thing when you wake up, last thing when you go to bed.
Yeah.
You're waiting 30 seconds to get your coffee,
Yeah. And maybe it's that alcohol that's giving you that dopamine burst, and you're trying to figure out. I think for me, before I knew this research, I just thought, well, you'll just have to white knuckle through it. You just say, okay, want to change my habit. But and I know that doesn't work. We all woke up.
A small group of people.
Oh, yeah.
I think
you can. You can.
You can just grit down. Yeah.
You wake up on January 1st and you have that list of things that you want to change about yourself, right? And guess what happens? Like a month later, most of the people, either quit or didn't get to those goals, because it's not just about having that intention. You have to fight those cravings when they come. And so what I did in the book is kind of give some actionable tips. Like there's some, for example, going for a sunny walk is one of the easiest non-food interventions you can do to start to raise your dopamine levels, because it's the exercise, the movement. The movement itself makes the gut bacteria create these things called short-chain fatty acids. And they're like the anti-inflammatory magic kind of superpower chemicals. And so they go all over the body and start to calm the inflammation. And so then, people say your best probiotic is exercise, right?
Yeah.
And then you have sunlight, which is giving you that burst of dopamine. We are sun-loving animals. Even if you hate the sun, your cells love the sun. Your brain loves the sun. And there's this hormone called alpha MSH, melanocyte stimulating hormone, which you think of in melanin, but it's actually also in appetite control.
Interesting.
And
really.
it actually helps you control your appetite and cravings for the rest of the day.
I love it. So just by doing one thing, targeting a specific goal, we're actually supporting so many other things that are in support of our wellness. I love that. So this is why it's so important not to get locked in on, I want this, and this supports that. And whatever we find in that process is the only thing to support that.
Right.
No, it carries over. I mean, again, we are a system made up of systems. So it's so, I think, naive of us to assume that there's only one thing that supports one pathway in the body.
Absolutely. And it also explains to me why during the pandemic, we were more tired, we were more depressed and distressed. And because we were indoors, most of us were not seeing as much daylight as we usually do. We're not moving as much as we usually do. We're not socializing as much. And all of these things have multiple effects on your body, not only just appetite, but it's like your mood, your anti-inflammatory chemicals, like everything started to change. And we kind of saw a snapshot of what our future is going to look like.
That compounded for weeks, months.
Yeah. Years.
Years is not the recipe for success here.
Absolutely. And I think, teenagers, it just breaks my heart, because when I thought about the impact of what we were talking about here and what I wrote in the book is that, I'm half my life is over and I figured these things out the hard way. I honestly, I don't know about you, but I figured this out the hard way. I was down. I was anxious. I was feeling like my body was out of control. My mind was out of control. I had to learn the hard way that some of these things were going to need to change. And I made the hard changes, right? But we have a whole generation of young people who are even more inflamed. They're eating 75% processed foods.
Wow, jeez.
And they are seeing very little natural light. A lot of them are, staying up very late.
And their social interaction is this.
Social interactions.
Yeah.
And you think about where we're going with this, and until we really bring awareness to this topic, we're just going to be going down this route of skyrocketing mental health disease. And so I keep telling my kids, I have 2 kids that are both now teenagers, and I watch them and I see their friends and I see the environment they live in, and it's a different world. And 70 years ago, it was a different world. And so when we were growing up, it was still kind of transitioning into this new phase, right? So what I think is we really need to take a hard look and say, okay, we're doing a few things really wrong for our future populations.
Yeah.
We need to make some changes based on this new science.
Yeah. What about kind of the more, I'll say, mental, emotional health side of things, more of that kind of qualitative state of being? We were talking about before we hit record how in, your own personal science and endeavors, you've kind of realized how the thought of, like a lot of people, I don't really drink that much. I'm just a social drinker. But then by actually tracking it sometimes or using maybe a wearable, you kind of got that quantitative feedback of how much that actually does negatively affect the body. And then it kind of showed you maybe like, all right, it's not the alcohol that I'm after. That's not really the craving. But when I say yes to a happy hour, yes to meet up for this or that, it's the more that social aspect, which I would argue, I think you can't argue has a lot of physical benefits, but I think at its core, that's mental health, that's emotional health, that's like the community that we've been kind of talking about. So can you kind of expand on maybe why, where, how we're getting these cravings when it's even, not even about a food, it's about this other mental, emotional connection?
I mean, we are social beings, and no matter how motivated to do your work you are, I do this, I'm sure you do too. I'll say, I'm going all in on work this week. This is my get things done. And soon you realize that we are social beings. We need social interaction, albeit it could be small, it could be subtle, but we need that for our happiness, for stress levels. There's definite benefit to social interactions. In fact, new study came out that said that social relationships were the largest predictor of longevity and healthy life.
Really? Oh, yeah. I mean, well, we've seen this for a while now with the blue zones.
Yeah.
The most common thread across all blue zones, centenarians around the world, is they have community. They have a core group of people.
And then this one was like the longest study, 85 years. And they said that this is the study by Dr. Waldinger, and it is, and he wrote a book about it called The Good Life, and basically they showed that having close.
Yeah, I just had Dr. Mark Schultz on the show.
Yeah,
his co-author. Yeah.
So strong relationships are the highest predictor, right? So we are social beings. We need to socialize. Unfortunately, in our world, socializing has some negative addictions and cravings.
It's got some vices to it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that we talked about it. It's very difficult to break from those vices. You can be social. You can go for walks. You can, do a golf outing. You can, it doesn't have to be at a bar. Yeah. It doesn't have to be around unhealthy things.
What I love here in LA, there are a lot of places like this popping up, like social wellness clubs that don't even have alcohol.
Yeah.
Like mocktails, or one of my favorite spots here is called Remedy Place. And you go and it's like you do recovery things together. You do ice bath together. You do yoga together. You do Irish sauna together. It's amazing.
It is. I saw, I was trying to go there one day, but it was closed. But that's what I'm talking about, is like, maybe we figure out how to be social. And there's nothing wrong with socializing over food. It's a beautiful 1,000-year-old tradition.
I'm always there for food.
Yeah.
Always there.
But now that we're seeing the signs of alcohol, like I used to think, because of the Blue Zones work, because of history, that alcohol was great. It's a bonding thing. It is known in thousands of years ago, they used it as a way to celebrate. Yeah. And so
even all the blue zones, except for Latter-day Saints, every other blue zone has alcohol in the community. But then we realized with the new science that it's not that it was helping them. It's like, they're probably healthy despite that. Like they were walking 5 miles, in Sicily to get to the winery to hang out with their friends. Yeah. Right. A lot of other factors. And, it was coupled with their social interaction. So maybe it was a social interaction itself that was boosting their... Like all the women, I think it's in Japan, it was this one of the blue zones, they always had sake. Yeah. Always had sake, even though I was living above 100, but because they always did it together. Yeah. And I think that part of it, so when we look at it in the very, the lens of humanity, evolution, I think that some of these vices can be helpful. If it brings you together as a community, if you have friends that you love and you also love to have a glass of wine, I don't think that that's so bad. And it's a personal decision. And you and I were talking about it, like I felt like I can still be with the same amazing people without having a ton of alcohol. And I think that is up to you. But I think you can kind of, like you said, the mind, body, spirit, like you have to kind of balance it all. Now, there are some things that are extremely just destructive, that a lot of these things like alcohol, gambling, addictions can
really spiral out of control very quickly, but in a small, tiny sense. Like if you go to Vegas once in a few years and you're controlled about it, I mean, it's not a positive thing per se, but it's definitely can be the other things that you're doing around it, socializing, whatever. It's going to kind of negate the negative effects.
This brings into mind for me, I'm a big Jocko Willink fan. And lately his theme of discipline equals freedom has been kind of coming back into my life. And I think it's kind of timely as well. As we're talking now, it's January, New Year. And this is where a lot of us are kind of, okay, I need to be more regimented. I want this goal. I want to reintroduce this way of living, for my physical, mental, emotional, spiritual well-being. And at first that kind of comes across as structure, regimen, discipline, all these things. Yes. And we think we have to stay married to that forever. And then if we ever come out of that, we're going to spiral.
Yeah.
But there's so much beauty to be had. And if we just maintain this core structure of, call them non-negotiables or very fluid rules, fluid infrastructure. If you have even just the baseline of discipline in wherever you go, Vegas, happy hour, any kind of social gathering, you have these agreements with yourself that provide that discipline and provide that fluid structure. You're not actually as married to the thing as you think. You actually have so much more freedom because you are getting the life that you want. Or for a lot of us, I think we're getting the life that we think we're missing out on because we're going to say no to that. Yes to me, which I'm all for saying yes to you. But over time, that can feel isolating, especially if other people don't have the same goals or the same beliefs. Like, for example, one thing I've been doing for a while now, my alcohol consumption has dramatically dropped over the last 2 years. But I still like to be social. I'm very social. So what I do is I bring a 6-pack of sparkling water, shout out Cured Nutrition, and it's vitamin D and CBD and lion's mane infused sparkling water.
Oh, nice.
So I'm the guy, I'm still showing up to this party. I got a 6-pack. Honestly, most people don't even look. They're like, it's the thing that we think we're supposed to have.
Yeah.
They see a guy walk in, he's got a 6-pack. Okay, cool. What you drinking, bro?
Yes.
I'm cracking open my sparkling lion's mane water. And I'm socializing. I'm staying hydrated.
Yeah.
And thanks to the vitamin D and the lion's mane, I am so much more in tune.
Yeah.
My cognition is enhanced. I'm focused. I'm present. I love that way more. And also I love the fact the next day I'm not hungover.
Yeah.
But here's our opportunity to introduce the discipline for freedom in our own lives, but also to be the examples for people. Because if we don't have to only always be the ones fighting for this change, that's going to make us so much more adherent. And I think, our community is a better place.
Yeah. I love that. I am very disciplined. And I think that it comes from, you have a military background, but I have an immigrant background. And I think that discipline has been such a huge player in my life. And I agree that it really does give you freedom. I mean, it makes you a better person, but I do struggle with it because of the same thing we're saying is that, is it too much? Is there a trade-off? And I think you said it exactly right. As long as you're able to still socialize in a way that you find fulfilling. And maybe that means that not hanging out with the people that are doing the negative things. I used to apologize a lot or try to hide, if I didn't want to drink that day or that. And
there's so much self-imposed shame almost around these choices when they're actually making us better.
Exactly. I used to do the same thing with eating. So I've always been a healthy eater. And I think there was a lot of shame around it when I was younger because it was party. It was drinking. It was French fries. It was nachos. And I would want to partake, but I didn't want to.
Because we don't want to be cut off from the community, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But now I'm really unapologetic about it. Everybody knows. They're like, she's not going to eat that, or it's okay. She's not going to have that. And I think I felt free finally. I'm like, okay, I can be myself. It's okay if they don't like me because I don't eat nachos. So be it. And if I want to have a nacho, I don't want them to be like, wait, I thought you said you don't eat those, So it's I definitely have changed my views over the years. I've realized, like you said, discipline gives you a structure. And even when you want to have fun, you just give yourself some parameters and go for it.
what I love about having discipline, even if you do kind of go all in gung ho for a little bit, you're probably going to learn some protocols, or even just a couple little habits, things that you can go to instead of something else that you don't have to, again, stay married to that forever.
Yeah.
But later on, maybe that same level, that same heightened level of discipline is not where you are or where you want to be. Or maybe you want to kind of just temporarily bow out. You can always just recall on parts of it to serve you. It's like, I don't need A through Z right now. I just need B and S kind of thing.
Yeah,
you know?
Exactly. And we're always evolving. I'm always giving myself new challenges, new disciplinary challenges.
Good, yeah.
And I think that for us as humans, so one of the things I actually talk a lot about in the book is that we need dopamine. Dopamine is our motivator. Okay, so we need dopamine to keep us on a path of a goal. And so, for example, if you're trying to get better at fitness, you're seeing your progress. It's the dopamine that keeps you going back to the gym, keeps you, because the way dopamine works is that it's pleasure mixed with discomfort. You feel good, but you quickly feel like you need to do it again. And
that's the thing. Yeah.
It's nature's way of keeping
we
you.
only get it after certain things.
Yes. And it's your way, it's nature's way of saying, keep on going, Chase. Like, it doesn't, fine, you got this, but now it's time to go again. Now it's time to get better.
Here's the reward, but you know it took work to get here. So if you want even more reward, you got to go back to the work.
Yes. And it's just like a beautiful system to keep us kind of motivated. And you, of course, there are people who refine that really well. There are people who do really poorly where they may over celebrate and they may get a complete dopamine release and now they're no longer motivated to go the next day. So they always say celebrate, but not too much. Like tell maybe a couple of friends, but don't go crazy. Like, I don't know about you, but on my journey, I've, being a newborn in this wellness world, I learned that the hard way because I think what happens is there's this whole internet phenomenon of celebrate every moment. Everything is a big deal. Like, you should be celebrating. And I actually realized that for me, and makes sense with dopamine, that I need to pull back just slightly. I want to celebrate with my close people. Maybe I tell a few friends. Maybe I celebrate internally, but I'm not going to make a big party out of it, post it all over the place, make it a big deal, because I want to be motivated to keep going. Like, this is not the end for me. Like, I want to, whatever it is that you're trying to do, unless it's the end, you don't want to go big.
Right. Yeah. None of us want to celebrate the end right now, because if we admit that, then how do you bounce back after that?
Yeah. Like, they say that people have a big lull, after winning like a big award or being at the pinnacle of their career. They have kind of like this dopamine depletion.
Which I was sharing with you earlier. I went through this really advanced genetics testing and found out, again, which is amazing, the whole theme we're kind of talking about here of the mental self and the physical self, the gut and the brain, the connection that we have. I used to really beat myself up a lot because I would get in these lulls, these just inexplicable bouts of depression just randomly for like a couple of days. And I was trying to force myself, like, Chase, like, you shouldn't feel this way. Like, you have so much to be grateful for. Like, just get back to it. And I would like kind of be counterproductive. And then I found out that actually in celebration or any kind of like peak where I have heightened dopamine release, I hypermetabolize it. And so it takes longer for me to kind of get back to that baseline of my normal dopamine just to go through a day and not be like, oh.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a lot of power to know thyself even more. But, also just in general, I think that's a great practice. You're not setting yourself up for possible failure, poor mental health, and through everything else we've been learning, kind of feeding in, poor physical health.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about how cravings work, so the strongest craving pathways, dopamine pathways, happen with things like gambling because it's intermittent rewards. When you get an intermittent reward, unexpected, your dopamine release is huge.
This is literally the Vegas casino. Boom, 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 ding, 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 ding.
it's the explosion. And that's why something like video games or gamblings are so addictive because that dopamine burst is huge. It keeps you coming back for more. You want more of that release. You play more even. And then if you don't get it for a while and then you get it again, that one is even stronger. And so you are like reinforcing that behavior. And it's the same thing, you know, with some food that you love. You can, if you eat something and it's not as good, you know, you say you love donuts, okay? And the donuts that you're always in the pursuit of the most delicious donut, and some of the donuts. Which is, of
course, here in LA, Sidecar Donuts. Everybody knows that.
Oh, yeah, Sidecar. I don't know about very much about donuts, but I know that the name of that place. And so you might pursue a better donut, but you're not getting that dopamine release with those. But then you find like the best donut even better than Sidecar, which will.
If you do, let me know because I will.
You'll fly there.
I will be there
because that's your dopamine.
Oh yeah,
pathway.
yeah.
It's an intermittent, unexpected reward. You go there and you eat it, and maybe not even be that good, but it's keeping that dopamine.
The hunt for more.
The hunt for more, and that's dopamine. And so I think that if you can use it for good, it can be really helpful. So way I actually give the directions in the book. So if you take the intermittent reward schedule of dopamine, but you turn it upside down, make it for good. So what you do is you intermittently reward yourself. It can't be yourself. It has to either be a pop-up on your phone that had been set up in advance, or it's someone else giving you on, say, like 3 non-consecutive random days of the week. And you get a reward that, hey, it's Tuesday, today's your reward day, and say it's sugar that you're working on, whatever. You want to change this donut addiction that you have, okay? And you give yourself a delicious, healthy dessert. Maybe it's a baked, chocolate chip, blondie or something, right? And it's similar to a donut, but it's a healthier version.
Like sneakily trying to transition this addiction, this
and
craving.
Then basically teaches you like how, there's a neuroplasticity moment where you can use that dopamine release and you can start to talk yourself into, hey, this was so good. This was amazing. I want this again. And then you do it again on another random day. And slowly what you're doing is you're creating a neural pathway that's positive away from the craving that was
waiting
negative.
until you're in that moment of like, I need it, I got to have it kind of thing. And then maybe you make the choice that you really don't want.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. It's like, if you think about it, there's so many things. Yeah. There's so many things I want to do. Like I keep trying it with new things. I did it with dark chocolate. So meaning that instead of unhealthy dessert to have dark chocolate and really savor it and love it intermittently. You don't want it every day. If you have it every day, it's not special.
Right. Yeah.
And it's not building that dopamine pathway. Yeah. You want it to be surprise. You want it to be special. You want it to be different. And that's what creates it. I'm
always curious when someone sits down to write a book about a topic, and we've covered so much here. Yeah. Of course, we're going to have all the information down in the show notes for everybody, as well as, the last book, I'm So Effing Tired, where we sat down and talked about burnout, which was so perfect because at that moment of life, I was going through. I was just on the other side of the worst burnout of my life. When you sat down to write this, was there something that you found that was just so blatantly, oh my God, I can't believe more people don't know about this, or this is just like, the diamond in the rough kind of thing, or was it more of a solidification of something that you really believed to be true when it came to cravings and all of this?
I think the thing that blew my mind during writing this book was a study on schizophrenia. Okay. So they took patients who had schizophrenia, they took their gut microbiome, and they transplanted it into animals because you can't really, it's not right to transplant schizophrenic or just bacteria into others. And they put it into mice. And then they took non-schizophrenic patients and they put it into other mice. The researchers were able to pick out with 100% accuracy the mice that had received the schizophrenic microbiome they just knew it based on their behavior because the microbiome was able to completely change their personalities.
Wow.
The things that they did, however mice schizophrenia presents, they were able to find, they saw that with 100% accuracy. And to me, I was like, okay, I knew that it was important and I knew it's contributing.
This is like all the sci-fi nanotechnology we've ever read about. This is our gut microbiome.
Yes. It is changing your mental state in such a profound way. And it had nothing to do with transplanting the brain or hormones or like anything. And then they did it with depression and they did it with Alzheimer's and autism. I mean, it's like you think about the possibilities there.
Did it work the other way around if they took like super happy, healthy people?
So what they did is in the depressed population, they did a healthy microbiome and they were able to reverse it. So there's this whole world of I know.
Wow.
So it's called psychobiotics.
Psychobiotics.
Yeah.
That's a first for me in the show.
Yeah. So psychobiotics is this idea that gut microbiome can change your whole mental state.
Wow.
So think about depression, anxiety, autism, Alzheimer's, schizophrenia. I mean, they've basically gone down the line of everything they can, do it with, and they found that it works. The question is, what are these bacteria?
Yeah.
Right?
Explain yourself.
Yeah.
Who is your leader?
Yes.
Seriously.
Exactly. Like how do we package this so that we can cure all of these diseases? Because sometimes it's not a 100% change. When you ask someone to change their diet, to change their exercise schedule, to change their sleep schedule, yes, that's
change your entire life.
Right. Yes, they can do that. But what if you were going to say, do all that, but here's a set of bacteria that are going to help you on your journey. Like that's the future.
Wow, it makes me think about, Bradley Cooper and Limitless. Maybe that pill was just all the best bacteria rolled up into one capsule,
Guess what, Chase? There's a company out there in Boston that's selling the fecal matter in pills form of athletes, elite athletes for people to consume. And if you think about it.
Is this the next level performance enhancing supplement scene?
Exactly.
Wow.
Because just like you can, enhance the dopamine production, the muscle production, you can enhance the testosterone production. So they transplanted gut bacteria from a male mouse to a female mouse, and the testosterone levels went sky high without doing anything to the testes.
Just the bacteria.
Just the bacteria. Isn't that crazy? So if you think about
I'm going to be nerding out. I have to go home and just dive into books, and I am blown right now.
Isn't that crazy? So then you think about it, like the athletic prowess that we talk about, can that be transplanted and studies show yes.
Wow.
I mean, I think a lot of people out there would be willing to take pills from elite, not just athletes, but elite leaders, people. So the quick and dirty way to do this, if you were like, I don't want to swallow any fecal matter right now, let's go step.
Just be careful when we describe fecal matter in the quick and dirty way.
Yeah, well, that's true.
Just clarify.
I'm using a lot of terms here. So what you want to do is realize that when you share food with people, you share skin-to-skin contact, you are hugging them, you're hanging out with them, you are interacting with them, you are sharing gut bacteria with those people. So, that concept of you are the product of the
5 people
you hang around with, from the microbiome sense, it's kind of like a mini fecal transplant, right? Because you may be sharing food with them inadvertently. You may be sharing bacteria with them.
Oh, the amount of bacteria, trillions of bacteria that live on our skin before we even get into, the gut aspect. I mean, it's an external and internal exchange before we ever
Exactly. In twin studies, they're able to see that twins separated at birth more closely resemble their partners or homemates than they do each other when it comes to microbiome. Because microbiome is that transferable.
Wow. I mean, it makes sense. I'm kind of thinking about now, I remember hearing, years ago, to me it was new, I think around like 2014-ish, you could do this with yourself.
Yeah.
Doing a bacteria sample, stool sample, and then actually supplementing with your own sample that actually had profound benefits for most people in cleaning up gut health. So I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, if that can happen of your own sample in your own body, introducing that of something else, like, it makes me question about like how sanitary, but of course I'm sure
it's banned by the FDA because of the concerns. It's communicable diseases, viruses, bacteria.
Look at what we're dealing with.
You're literally playing with fire. But when I think about it, most people, and maybe I'm just too deep in this world, but I would, with someone I knew was healthy, tested, checked, healthy family member, friend.
I'm not saying no right now.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of a new practice of mine over the years, is not saying no to anything right away. But just, I mean, when we look at the science here and just, in rats, but also in humans with the self-sample, it's worth looking into.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
If you could cure disease, I think
especially something like Alzheimer's, mental health disorders. Wow.
There is this was years ago when I was starting to get into this world. I found all these Facebook groups of people who are doing fecal transplants illegally. Just like
grassroots.
Because in the US it's banned, but in many countries it's not. And so there's all this new, it's kind of like when something is new, burgeoning, like it's going to take a few years for it to become mainstream, but I think it's not too far that psychobiotics become a part of our culture.
Wow, psychobiotics.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I know what we're talking about next time we have you on the show. This has been amazing. And thank you so much for coming on the show again. Thank you so much for your time. And I mean, this new labor of love with the book, I'm So Effing Hungry. And just also for being another reminder for me and my audience that the power and influence we do have over our life when we get super specific and dial in or choose to dial in one goal, one path, one system, brain health, gut health, lose weight, build muscle. There's immense power to be had and results to be had when we go that specific, but also not to forget the ripple effect that it's actually having and how also we can kind of take a lot of that pressure off of just thinking collectively. I just, happiness.
Yeah.
There are ways to radically influence your life through the lens of happiness that influence and create better health, longevity, thwart disease and illness and all this stuff. It's incredible.
Yeah. First of all, thank you so much for having me back on. I feel like we had a whole different conversation this time. And it was so enlightening. But I think the reason I think these conversations are good is that it's not just about losing weight. Like we didn't even touch on losing weight, right?
Which satiety and cravings and all have a huge role in.
If you control your cravings and appetite, you can be in the best shape of your life. But what we really talked about is the actual purpose of all this is how do we change our mental health? How do we stop ourselves from going down this path of disease? And that's where I think it's really powerful.
Yeah. Well, perfect segue into my final question, which I definitely asked you last time.
Yeah.
But I'm curious what your definition is now. Living a life ever forward, those two words, how would you define that? How do you describe that?
Living a life ever forward. It's learning finally that you are the only one who's going to save yourself. I think when you learn that, you will move forward. There is no person in the white horse coming with a platter of solutions for you.
No one's coming to save you.
Yeah. You got to get up and, once you realize that, that's when you move forward.
That is, I'm getting kind of like delayed goosebumps. It's very funny you say that. Quick little tangent as we wrap up here. A friend of mine and actually a client in our production company, Operation Podcast, shout out Greg Anderson, his show, Endless Endeavor. His kind of mantra and what he's been putting out there is just that no one is coming to save you.
I love that.
And today he was actually that was referenced and shouted out on the Joe Rogan show.
Wow.
He had a guest on who knows Greg and was kind of like they were talking about that and just went live. And so literally today, this whole concept of no one's coming to save you has been top of mind for me. And now here we are wrapping up with that as well.
I love that.
So that's interesting.
That was the biggest realization for me, because I think in medicine, you're taught like, oh, wait for the solution to come out. You know, there's going to be a secret. There's going to be a, and then I finally learned like, no, it's all within us.
And I will say, going into year 5, LA Chase, I can say this now, I'm tapping fully into my woo. You are the medicine.
Yeah.
You are the medicine. Interpret that as you will.
Yeah, exactly. I love that.
Well, the book, I'm So Effing Hungry,
Yes.
is out now as of this podcast is live.
Love it.
Again, it's linked down in the show notes for everybody, and I can't wait to check it out myself.
Oh, thank you.
All right.
Thanks.
Oh, I got so excited there. I
love
feel like I could just like go for more.
I know.
Yeah, psychobiotics, that was blowing my mind. Crazy.
I know. It's like, I thought you knew about that because you're so dialed into that world, but you got to read that.
Apparently I missed this.
It's going to, think about mental health.
Yeah. I mean, as you were describing it, I was just like, oh, duh.
Yeah.
Yes. And then I was just reminded of all the I actually almost did that experience with the self-sample years ago.
Yeah.
The company, it kind of just like fell through. But again, just like, duh, it makes sense. But just like hearing now that it has like a thing and a field and how it's being researched now.
The problem is that they're not able, they've been doing all these studies. Like they even took people on SSRIs, like antidepressants, and they put them on probiotics, all different types of probiotics to try to figure out like what it was, which one works. What they found is it worked really well in conjunction with the SSRI, but none of the probiotics worked on their own.
Interesting.
They worked almost as good, but like you need to blow that thing out of the water for it to be. So everybody, of course, wants to find that right concoction because nobody really knows what it is that the right cocktail to kind of replace these meds.
Which that was an area I had in mind. I didn't even get to. It was wanted to kind of go back to the concept of probiotics and prebiotics. But I was really curious when you were talking about that initial study of when these people made that radical diet change, mostly going plant-based.
Yeah.
I was curious, was it because of just the heightened increase in probiotics and prebiotics and fiber and insoluble fiber and all these things that like are core fundamentals for good gut health that I'm sure was just this wash.
Basically, what I did in the book is I said, hey, here, eat these 5 different foods or 6 different foods, every single day. And it was to mimic because the diet that they used in that study was really hard to figure. They basically had them choose from a list. It's hard to interpret.
Okay.
But it's basically fiber, real foods, unprocessed. They had them get off of the heavy processed meat and dairy. So it was like a burgers and fries kind of group, like a McDonald's burgers and fries kind of group. And then they turned it into like a Whole Foods plant-based. So of course you're going to see.
I love how, and it's just like, for me, I'm just like, well, again, no shit. But like when the general public or even like the medical community specifically is trying to address a specific medical need, the most common thread we see is like, reduce processed foods, sugars, go more plant-based, grass-fed meats if you're going that route, increase activity, sunlight, sleep.
Yeah.
For everything.
Yeah.
Like,
everything.
No shit.
I know.
But it's just so cool how we can get so myopic to an intention of what we're trying to fix and change in the body, but also just like collectively, we just know that works for everything.
It's so sad. So I just got my first colonoscopy ever this week, and I was looking at all the GIs in my group, like my husband's a GI, and all the GIs in their group, and I'm like, they don't follow that. I mean, I hate to say it, but like they don't. So why would they be able to tell anybody to change their diet or lifestyle, right? So it's kind of has to come from, an external source. Like if your doctor isn't able to, these are hard things. Like, and I know we are dialed in, yet it's still hard.
Yeah.
So imagine if you were not
Sometimes
even.
knowing's even worse. Sometimes I wish I could go back to like ignorance was bliss.
Oh my God, I know. Like if I don't get a good night's sleep, I'm like obsessed with it. And then I'm like, no, but it's okay. It's one night. It's not a big deal. Like I'll get over it,
Whereas, and now we can see on the Whoop, that
it's
one
like
glass
you
of
get
wine.
you get all this like feedback. And
but
you're
I
like,
love my Cabernet.
I know. It's harder than it. It's harder than it seems. So it's almost like I know some patients and people that just say, oh, whatever, you only live once or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, but do you want to live it like debilitated and depressed? Like, now that I know this stuff, I'm like, I don't want to be sad or unmotivated or, addicted to sugar.
Yeah, that whole aspect of like learning emotions and like the mental state. How, of course, in some instances, I think there is actually some biochemical misfiring situations going on to address, but like how so much of that is actually like I don't have to accept, or it is just like a temporary kind of like thing that my body is going through. It's not an issue up here as much as it is like with the collective system.
Yeah.
And so if I can just lean into that and also like give myself the grace that like, okay, I either need to just ride this out, or like I don't need to go to the typical things of try to over motivate myself or shake my entire system. It's just I need to go back to the basics of like, have I been outside today? Have when's the last time I had a salad?
I know it's so hard because like they always say if you don't get the basics right, like none of this stuff is going to help. And it's like I wish more people could. People ask me all the time, "What is the right probiotic? What is the secret?"
Sure, yeah.
And I'm like, if you don't get these other things right, like don't even worry about that stuff. Yeah. It's like getting new shoelaces for your shoes for a marathon. Like that's not going to do anything if you're not doing the training, right?
Yeah.
Like,
when you were talking about walking, I was going to say probably if I had to only give, and I do give this advice a lot, one piece of advice for health, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. Walk.
Yeah, same.
It just does so much there. I forget the study. It came out a while ago, but I'm going to butcher. I think it was like a theta state. But basically, the magic mark for like exercise, that 30 to 40 minute low intensity steady state exercise. But they found like why we think it is so therapeutic and so conducive to increasing mood and mental health is, and it doesn't matter the weight of the person, just the gravitational force against pretty much any human body. When you're walking for that period of time, the reverb you get, the counterproductive gravitational force, the reverb that goes from the ground to your heel striking up, it's a kinetic chain, goes up to your brain, basically gets you into, I'm pretty sure it simulates more theta, but it gets you into like the brainwave activity of calm, of like, just like, I don't need to like be hyper analyzing thinking right now. And so it's like that sweet spot for the physical self, but it's also the sweet spot for the mental self as well.
I mean, I'm a huge fan of walking. So I was saying like I did this fitness journey for the last year and a half. And like one of the things I really changed was I love to exercise. So I was like I would do like every class and whatever. And my nutrition coach was basically like, you need to cut down all this like noise, just walk and lift. And like when I just simplified it, I had all this extra time and it was like so much better. I don't need to go to those groups. I can socialize in other ways. Like I go for walks. I take my phone with me. It was really, like you said, that was the biggest change.
That's like all I do. I lift, I walk.
Same.
I do yoga. Last year my goal was once a week. Now I'm twice a week.
I'm back to once a week because I used to do it a bunch of times a week because I was doing all these other classes too. Now I'm like, I need it at least once a week.